Hello, my name is Rivera. I am a TC in cohort number 4 in New Caney, and this video diary is just to narrate my year as a TC for Texas Tech. So I hope you enjoy. So Texas Tech has brought so many high moments. I would say that most of my high ones have been in the classroom and just, through the experiences that I've had with my with the other TCs. So in the classroom, one of my highest moments was um, just it honestly was just a general the general growth that I felt I had throughout the last 2 months of my being a TC. And one of the lessons that I was just really proud of was the lesson that I did after the students took the mock STAR test, and I realized that a lot of the students were not understanding when they needed to divide and when they needed to multiply in word problems. And so I did something called the poster method, where the students analyzed a word problem, and they had to try to figure it out on their own first and see what they knew about it, and then the students then worked on it with their group, and then they went around the other groups to see how the other groups solved the multiplication word problem. And I really liked the lesson. I liked that the students were thinking, that they were truly analyzing what they were doing. I like to see the end products of a lot of the students' posters and the way that they solved it. So I really enjoyed learning and seeing how much students can solve and figure out on their own, and it was just really exciting to see. Just in general, any days that I found that my students were doing that, they were just truly problem solving and thinking critically. Those are by far my favorite days, my happiest days. So those were some of my highs, and other highs were just successes. So for example, whenever I passed my BLPLT, the Spanish proficiency exam, I was at a life group, which is like a church group thing that we do. We hang out with friends, and it was afterwards, and I was just refreshing and refreshing and refreshing because I was so anxious to see what it was. Although in my head, I was so sure I had failed it. And so then when I saw that I had passed, I literally, I got so excited. I was jumping up and down, and my friends were congratulating me. And so I was so proud of myself because, it just kind of that was probably one of my biggest doubts, was that, what if my Spanish isn't good enough, stuff like that. And so I was just so excited when I saw that I passed it. It was a huge, huge, huge day. It was so exciting for me. So that was another one of my high moments. Um, I think for me, the transition between kindergarten and fourth grade was really difficult. And I remember because I left kindergarten ready to go, but I liked it and I liked the students. And I feel like that's something it's been a trend, because there's things that I didn't like about kindergarten, and there's things that I like about fourth grade that, I love. But the transition was really tough, and I think it was partly because it was during writing star season that I came in, that I just felt like everybody was on edge, and I didn't feel like I was able to fully, submerge myself like I did in kindergarten. And so, for the first month there in my fourth grade placement, I just didn't feel like I was there yet. I felt like I was just kind of like a fly on the wall. It just didn't feel like I was teaching. And so those moments were they were difficult for me because it was a lot of getting used to it. And so that month was hard just because, I just feel like I didn't just connect with the team as quickly as I did with the kindergarten team. But I grew to love my mentor teacher, and I grew to love my students, and I love my students. They were amazing. I think that they were awesome students, and by the end of the semester I loved fourth grade. And I had to just learn how to deal with other stuff, and just focus on the students and focus on teaching them and seeing their growth. And it ended up being an awesome experience. So I started feeling more like a teacher throughout my second semester, and it was around the end of February, beginning of March, mostly after the writing started getting that experience. And my mentor teacher, just she taught me so much. She showed me so many different teaching techniques, that I just, and she would allow me to implement them throughout the semester. And that's when I started feeling more like a teacher. And I had already gotten to know the students, and I started understanding their weaknesses, and places where they're thriving in. And so I learned to see what strategies or what learning techniques certain students learn best with. And so whenever I was able to implement these with each student, and able to see each student's growth, that's whenever I started to feel more like a teacher. So through the rubric, I have learned that um, teaching is a compilation of like a million things intertwined, and that if one thing is missing, then something else is gonna fail, and then if that part fails, something else fails. And so, I think that it's really important to analyze on your teaching techniques as a teacher to see what areas you're failing in, because those areas implement, or they affect other places in your teaching. And just in general, that if there's something going wrong in wherever it is, if students aren't understanding a topic, if you're having problems with behavior, if your classroom feels unorganized, stuff like that, if you look to see where in your rubric maybe you're failing at, then you can work on that and hopefully help better those situations. And something else that I've learned is just the big three: the thinking, academic feedback, and questioning. If you think about those things while you're planning your lesson, it will really help, just make sure that everything is combined. Because if students are thinking, if their minds are active, then they're less likely to misbehave and stuff like that. So throughout this process, we've learned a lot about um, taking the students' data, where they're at, and then having them grow from there. And I feel like that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm going to take with me. Before I was in this program, it seemed so simple to teach, and it's really not. And there's a lot of things that go into teaching, and there's students are so different. And so I find that the rubric is able to categorize everything into places where they seem a little bit more achievable. And so, first of all, the rubric, but also part of the rubric is, I really like that system of analyzing where the student's data is and where they need help in, to then design lessons that are targeted towards the student so they can learn and grow from there. So I remember in my kindergarten, whenever I was in kindergarten, me and Miss Gilliam, she was like, I was like, I think this person's my starfish. I think this person's my starfish. And um, I was just, I've learned that, you know, at least in my placement, there's been so many starfish that I think in general it's just that love for the student and that love to see the student grow, um, that has made me love teaching. And so, for example, I had one of my students who, at the beginning, when I first met him, I noticed that he was just super quiet, didn't really like to interact with other students, and in a way, he was my starfish. But for a certain thing, I wanted to help grow in him, which was his, I guess his like motivation to learn, his also his like self-reflection and, you know, being like brave enough to be like, I don't understand this. That was my goal with that student. And I feel like that's kind of how it was with a lot of my students, where it's like I saw something that that student needed help with, that I knew I could help him in the position that I was in, and that was my goal for that student. So why of teaching. And I think that from what I've learned here, it just depends on the students, you know what I mean? I might get a student next year in my placement that needs that, to see that the world has love and the world is awesome, and it can be awesome, and not so just like my students in kindergarten, you know? So I don't know how it's going to be, but I think in general, just finding something that you can help that student improve in that isn't exactly or precisely academics, um, that's something that is part of my why of teaching. So yeah.